Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Business in Calgary podcast powered by Sonic Coaching. I'm your host, Oliver Basner. And I want to introduce you to a guest. I'm delighted to have Cathy Orr here, who's the president and CEO of RGO Office Products here in Calgary. Uh, Cathy was selected by Business in Calgary as one of the 2024 Leader Awards. And so, first of all, congratulations being selected and winning that award, Cathy.
Well, thank you, Oliver. It
And
was a
thanks for
great
being
honor.
here.
Yeah.
Looking forward to our conversation. So, why don't we jump right in? So, Cathy, tell us a little bit about how RGO started, and also, let's talk a little bit about what it was like growing up with one of Calgary's business icons, right? And, Ross Glenn as a father who really, helped shape some of this great city that we're in, but also the business community. He was so involved with the business community. He loved Calgary and the people in it. So, what was that like growing up? And
Wow, it's a big question.
it's a huge question.
RGO started in 1966, and so I was a really small child at that time. And I just don't ever have a memory without thinking about my dad being in business and being at work. And so he started in 1966. He had a background in fixing typewriters.
Really?
So he worked for, Olivetti Underwood in the day. And my dad wasn't a really great student, which it's pretty common knowledge. But
But a great entrepreneur.
very great entrepreneur and a ton of energy. And so I thought it was pretty innovative that in the 50s, my grandparents were quite concerned about what his future might be like, since he didn't really like to go to school. And my grandpa took him for some aptitude testing, and they said that he had a really strong inclination mechanically. And so that's how he got into doing the typewriters.
Okay.
And so I thought that was a pretty innovative thing to do back at that time. So he worked for Underwood Olivetti, and I mean, you think back in time, we think there's been so much transition in the business world in the last few years, but it's been really happening since the beginning of time when you think about it.
Right.
So back then, he was covering a territory, and he'd become quite close with one of the senior people, one of the senior techs at Underwood Olivetti, and
Yes.
On very short notice they laid him off.
Oh,
And my dad was quite devastated because this fellow had been a mentor and a coach to him.
right.
And so he got thinking that, he didn't ever really want that to happen to him. He wanted to be in control of his own destiny. And so that's when he reached out and bought a small little typewriter sales and repair company.
That's how it all started.
Yeah,
Wow.
it did. And so my grandpa always had a joke that, he put my aunt through university, and he gave my dad $5,000 to start this company, and he thought he'd never see a penny back. And so it's quite a remarkable story, really. And then not long after he bought that business, from one of his clients, they said, "Oh, Steelcase were in town, and they were looking for someone to represent the Steelcase line." And he suggested that Ross reach out to them and tell them that he might be interested in becoming a Steelcase dealer. And so, of course, Dad did that, reached out, got the dealership on a handshake, and we've been a Steelcase dealer ever since. And so we're really proud to say that we'll be celebrating 60 years in business next year.
Wow. Congratulations. That's a huge milestone. Yeah, wonderful story. So typewriter, it all started with typewriters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I know Ross passed away earlier this year, and I'm sorry to hear about his passing. Obviously I was there at a celebration of life. I was amazed how many people were there, and the impact he had on the people and the stories that they were sharing. It kind of really speaks to what he thought about Calgary and how he loved this community. How has that impacted how the running of RGO? Because you are the president and CEO. Has that impacted how you're running things now?
Well, I think it's been really wonderful that I've worked with him for over 40 years. I didn't plan to start my career at RGO, but when I graduated from university in 1983, it was coming out of that national energy crisis.
Right.
And so, there were just, the opportunities weren't abundant like they had been. I'd worked at the Royal Bank going through school, and they weren't hiring people that didn't have a BCom. I had a Bachelor of Science. And so my dad said, why don't you come to RGO and see what you can do in this drapery division? And so, having that opportunity to work with him, when you asked me in the earlier question about, oh, what was it like? I mean, my dad was just always interested in everything. He loved Calgary. He loved Alberta. And he loved everything about the community. He just got involved, and his enthusiasm was contagious, and he was a big personality. So, he just was really had a lot of pride in being born in Calgary, and just knowing what happens here, and he just, and then over time when he started to have some success, he just felt that it was a privilege to give back.
Right.
And he just thought that Calgary, whatever, he was always thinking about what was good for the city, and he ultimately thought that would be good for business.
Right.
He kind of had those two, his economic filter and his community filter kind of toggled back and forth. And I remember the first big philanthropic commitment he made. I was still in high school, and I just remember it was $100,000, and the commitment was to the Jack Singer Concert Hall. And I remember going at least twice on December 31st to meet with Martha Cohen, who had been the campaign chair, to deliver the check for the year end. And I just had a really big impact on me, with the pride that he had in being able to do that. And then just, as I said at his service, there wasn't much that happened in this community that he didn't want to be part of. And so, when people are enthusiastic and willing, that gets around. And he just loved to support Calgary.
Wonderful.
And it rubbed off on us. We missed him this Stampede a lot.
Yeah.
He loved the Stampede. I think he went for 10 days straight. And so it's been really kind of cool to be continuing on with that, and his legacy of just, it feels like he's part of it, even though he's not here, but we know that he would love to be continuing on with that.
Right.
And I feel the same way. I mean, we've been really blessed by this community, and so it's important to give back where we can.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like you're going to keep that going for a long time. So
I'll do my best. Yeah.
So, that brings me into the next sort of topic. I wanted to jump in sort of that award that you won last year, right? And, one of the things that the judges said that the characteristics that stood out for the winners were creativity, imagination, and a commitment to the community, which you just, talked a lot about. Leaders were committed to making our community stronger, healthier, and more vibrant. And giving back to the community has always been a core value for you folks. So, and that started with your dad, right? And so, there's a lot of places where I know you've touched lives and impacted people as a family and as RGO as an organization. So, do you see that continuing on?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we have lots of places where we can contribute to the well-being of our people, like our customers and our people that work at RGO. And if we're going to continue to be successful, we're going to be able to give back some of that, in time and resources and effort.
Right. And for our listeners, anybody that's sort of, starting at the early stages of starting their business or more seasoned, do you think it's important for business to give back in general?
Well, I absolutely do think it's critical to give back. I mean, it's a core value. We're taught that through the faith. And, many faiths believe in giving back.
Yes, they do.
And I think that, it teaches us a lot. I once heard someone say that, we really appreciate you giving, but it's good for you to give. And I think that it shows that we have a focus bigger than ourselves, because, everyone has a story.
Yes.
And, we're all part of this ecosystem, and for some reason, we're all on a journey. Someday, you might need it. Some people, and later you don't. You can give it back.
Right.
So it's kind of a whole full circle moment, And I think for communities to be strong, there needs to be an investment. And over time, we're seeing it's getting harder and harder for governments to be participating in all of that, and maybe they shouldn't be.
Right.
I think that we can't be relying on governments to support all these different initiatives. But if we want that in our community, then we need to step up and participate.
Right. Completely agree. And I would say that, Ross was one of those people that definitely, left the world better than he found it, right? Through that generosity. So, yeah. RGO's core values, and they're on the website if anybody wanted to see them, but some of the core values are people, teamwork, customer relationships, health, safety, and environment. You've got some really powerful core values there. How do you, and again, for our listeners who are growing a business, and RGO's a pretty good sized company now, how do you make sure you stay true to those values and that people are actually living them as the company grows, as people are coming on board?
Well, I think it's a balance. Like when you start to build a company, I always say we tried to go from mom and pop to a more structured environment that still gives people room to grow and develop and be creative and be adaptive. And so I think that you set out what your mission and your goals are, and how, and your governance around how you're gonna work together. So, we talk about powerful collaboration, pursuit of excellence, working on giving, that ability to give back. And I always say to our people that, we want to be best in class, and I want to have a strong culture. So I always toggle between, that whole driving part of being a really strong advocate for strong business results.
Right.
But also next to that, I want to have a strong culture. And, we do a lot of great things in the community. I think we support our people well, but I always say it's not that I'm trying to be like, create this country club idea. It's about, we want to have a strong culture because we want to attract the best talent.
Right.
Because we want to have the best, we want to be able to deliver to our clients, and we want, if you want to work in our industry, I want you to work at RGO. I want you to think of RGO to want to work there.
Right.
If you need to buy things that are in need of what we do, I want RGO to be top of mind. And I also want, as a manufacturer, we want to be dealer of choice. So that's why we need to build a strong ecosystem. And in the last few years, it's challenging with all the things that we've been through. And so we want to be able to support our people. And I really, next to the sale, which I'm really passionate about, because that's my roots of being a salesperson.
Of course, yeah.
That I come by very honestly, but I'm really passionate about watching people grow. And I think, it's not always a perfect experience at RGO, but hopefully we're listening and we're here to make people's lives better. So I know people can't stay forever, and lots of things happen in people's lives, but I just trust that their lives will be better having come through our organization.
Right.
They've built a skill, they've gotten more solid financially, they've learned a lot. They've just been able to build a better life. And I think that's really, really critical, because none of us know the future.
Right. Absolutely, we don't.
And so, I think that's the part that gets me up every morning now, to watch these people grow. It's really, really exciting. And, I hate to think of it this way, but I'm kind of like on the back end of my career, if you will.
Right.
And I think about, okay, what is it that I want to leave, and what are the things that are important to me? And I really hope that we can transfer the knowledge and the expertise to the next generation while still adapting to what's coming through. And what's cool is that I think there's two-way mentoring going on here with the younger people, and then what we have to offer as well. So
Awesome. Yeah, no, something I heard you say was, we want to attract the best talent, right? And so often I hear in organizations, well, we have to hire the best people. And I don't agree with that statement. I think the way you worded it makes sense. You want to attract the best talent. You want to be the best place to work, right? And I know, for instance, best managed, the best managed program, you're platinum, company, you've been there for many, many years. So you want to attract that talent. You want to be a great place to work, right? Not just we need to hire somebody,
Yeah.
right? But we want to attract the best somebody.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is our guiding principles. We've just done a refresh on that, on the verbiage, but they really are about trust, passion, competency, and efficiency. And when I really love those 4 words because, there's lots of supporting bullet points underneath that. But I always say to our people, we're gonna hire people to these values, and we're gonna release them to these values.
Right.
So sometimes, if there's not a good fit, we want to deal with that sooner than later, and that's in the best interest of everyone. But if we do a really thorough job at the front end, then that's less of a problem at the back end.
Right.
And so, I think people, we're a service business when it comes down to it. A lot of our products are getting quite commoditized. As much as I hate to admit that, it's true. And so what sets us apart? It's our knowledge and our attention to detail and our service. That's what's going to set us apart as an organization. And I'm really proud of that. Some of the core values that Ross had that we will continue with because, they're in our DNA. It's just part of who we are about, being involved in the business, being there, and also, the tenets of just some really foundational business practices of, reinvesting in our business and, looking always, he had a saying, and I just, it's not hard to embrace some of this, is just, we'll try to always do what's right for the business first.
Right.
And I know sometimes people don't like that because they're like, oh, what do you mean? That's business. But really, if you do the fundamentals of the business first, then you have options later on. And having seen that, he set a phenomenal foundation for us. And so, that I feel very grateful. But on the other hand, it's a big responsibility to make sure we keep that going.
Of course.
Based on, what has laid in place. And so, and you're weathering a lot of things in the economy, and there's been a lot of headwinds the last 10 years.
Yes.
But, we've stayed true to these core values, and they've served us really well.
Let's talk about those headwinds a little bit. So, we, as we know, Alberta was going through a tough economy before the pandemic hit. Then the world went through a pandemic, including us, but we didn't go into it probably as strong as maybe we would have liked, right, as a province. Now we're out of that, and you're in the office furniture business as one piece of your business, right? People are working from home. We know that there's less office space being utilized. How have you been able to sort of innovate and keep moving forward?
Yeah, well, over that, all of those things are true, and they've impacted our business on some level. We have 4 businesses in Calgary. We have a window covering business, a furniture business, what I call commercial furniture now, flooring and technologies, which was evolved out of the equipment business,
right?
Typewriter. So, every one of those businesses have been impacted in different ways in a slightly different cycle. And so I think that, there's been a few things that have that helped us navigate through all of that, quite challenging for sure, but the fact that we've been able to be quite agile and adaptive. So one thing I'll tell you is that our focus has really shifted over the last few years on who our customer is. Because as you alluded to, the downtown core was basically, hollowed out from people not coming to work in offices, working remotely. It really changed the trajectory of, what's required in the office. One of the things that we talked about specifically on the furniture side as we started to see the pandemic, people come out of that, was that organizations were really having to earn the commute from people to come into the office. That little saying, earn the commute. Like, why do I have to come back? Because I'm way more comfortable. I think I'm more efficient at home. I don't have to travel. They got a
Right.
lifestyle. It was long enough of a time where people could build a bit of a lifestyle outside of what they'd been doing around the rigor of an 8 to 5 kind of a job. And so that's been really tough. And that's been much longer to come back than we ever I don't think anybody anticipated.
Right.
So in a way, there was a bit of a bump in some organizations because they're like, okay, what can we do to our space to create something inviting and unique to make sure people want to be here?
Right.
So you're upping the technology game. You're upping the kind of spaces that you've got. You've got lots of community spaces. So people are still doing some more hits down work, maybe working from home, but they're when they're wanting to connect, they're coming into the office, and that space needs to support that kind of activity. So that's where we've seen a really big pivot.
Right.
We've also done a lot more work in seniors living, education, and healthcare. And I mean, those sectors are here to stay.
Yes, they are.
And we've just gained a lot of expertise in those areas as well. So that's kind of neat to see how we've pivoted. And then all of our other types of businesses just follow suit in the various cycles. So usually it's flooring, demandables, furniture, window coverings, and technology, kind of in that order.
Right.
And so, we've just tried to look at also our client base and think about, okay, what can we do to get more share of wallet with a client? So we've really doubled down on that because we have great brand recognition in this market. So how do we work with our clients to go, hey, whenever possible, we try to get all the scopes. So there's been several projects that I could list where we did flooring, window coverings, furniture, technology, demandables. And so that's been a really strong play for us because we're already in with the client. We don't always get every one of the scopes, but we sure try.
Right.
And so that's really helped us, double down on opportunities because there's just less opportunities the last while too.
Right. Yeah, and I know, I mean, because you and I, had talked about it in the past. I mean, it was under your leadership where you came up with the, your one RGO. It's not, maybe it's 4 divisions, but you're one RGO, right? And so you've got offerings in all 4 areas that probably that same office space is going to need equipment. That same office space is going to need window coverings.
Or projects like the Cancer Center.
Right.
The Cancer Center, we did cubicle curtains, furniture, which was massive, and window coverings. We didn't do flooring. At the
Right.
BMO project that we just finished, we did all of it. Window coverings, technology, furniture, banquet furniture. We did, like we joke, from forks to forklifts in that space. and flooring, if I said, and window covering. So we did, and we did it through different channels. So that was really cool too. So, that's one of the areas where I've really enjoyed, getting to be the coach of that and sort of pulling that together. And then we have an incredible team of people being able to pull in and, come in and out.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and the BMO Center, I mean, if and people haven't been down there, it's beautiful,
Yeah,
right?
it's really great.
Stunning place. So,
Yeah.
I've coached as an executive coach. I've coached a lot of women leaders over the years. And I really have a firm belief, having worked with both male leaders and female leaders. Women often will carry a heavier load. Like, you're responsible not only for the organization as the president and CEO, but you're also probably going to go home and be responsible for being somewhat of the head of the family and making sure the family members are taken care of. How have you managed to juggle that for our women listeners? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I guess there's a few things I would say about that. The first thing I would say is that, sometimes as females we're told that we can have it all. And I don't actually believe that. I don't think we can have it all at once. I think there's puts and takes over a career. And so I think there's seasons and thinking through, okay, what are my goals at this particular time? I've been really fortunate that I've had a lot of male champions And I know not all women have had that.
Right.
I've had an incredible partner, my husband, Dave. He has been, incredibly supportive of my career aspirations. He's had a few of his own, and he's been successful in his own right. But he has been a huge champion of anything that I wanted to do. And I just think I've been really fortunate that, we've been able to work together as a team. And I know not everybody has that experience.
Right.
Of course, Ross was a huge champion of me in a bit of a unique way, in that he wasn't one for big accolades at all. But he was just a constant. And he had really, really good EQ, so he could kind of read what was going on. But he also gave me a lot of room to grow. And not everybody has that. And he was quite patient in the early days of the window coverings, which is the business that I built up. And that was where the bulk of my career was for 30 years. Like, those first 3 or 4 years, were really, really foundational years. And he was just, not putting any pressure on me. I once asked him, wow, how did you know that this was going to be such a success? He said, well, I just saw it, that it was always trending in the right direction. And that's a fundamental thing that I think about when we're growing new salespeople. Are they trending in the right direction? And when I think about that, I kind of chuckle, because there was a day when I thought, if I could just do a million, if this department could just do $1 million in revenue, I would think we'd arrived.
Right.
And a lot has happened over those 30 years, and we've outdone that by
blown that out of the water,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I think that was really fortunate. So that balance. I think that as women, we do take on more at home, and so just getting systems in place, and then deciding what your priorities are. That was always, I always had help at home, and I know some of my peers thought they didn't want to do that, and I knew that meant that there was less disposable income for a time.
Right.
But for me, that was worth it, because I didn't want to be at the end of my, I don't want to be at the end of my career and having my personal life totally atrophied. And so it's hard to keep that all in balance. There's no doubt about it.
No, some great sharing there. Like, I really liked, how you sort of, it's not the typical answer that I would have expected, which is you can have it all, right? Like, you've actually made it really clear that sometimes you have to prioritize one over the other, right?
And I think
there's
it's seasons.
You said
like,
seasons, yeah.
For me, one of the things that, I was a late bloomer. I guess you could kind of say Ross was a late bloomer. We didn't transition my role. Till he was in his late 70s.
Wow.
He was still really vital. But prior to that, I had a couple people say to me, why aren't you stepping up? You seem like a reluctant leader. And it wasn't that I was reluctant. The reality was Ross wasn't ready, and I knew if Ross wasn't ready, that wasn't going to work.
Right.
But secondly, our daughter was still in high school, and I'd made a commitment to myself that I didn't want to make that transition until she was through high school. And I'm really glad that it wasn't a big stake in the ground. It wasn't a big. I just had that in my mind, and that's how it turned out. She graduated in 2015, and I stepped into this role in November of 2016.
Well, congratulations on sticking to your own personal values on that as well. So thank you for that. I have a couple of questions I ask all my guests, so let's jump into those. Looking back, you've been in leadership a long time, Cathy. From the window coverings business for years, to being the president and CEO now for, I think it's almost 9 years, going on 9 years. What do you wish somebody would have told you at the start of your journey that you could share with maybe some listeners that are at the start of their journey?
Well, I think one thing that really stands out for me that would have been some coaching or mentoring that I would have had early on in my career was to have been more intentional about my career. I mean, you could say, wow, why are you saying that? You look back, you've had an incredible career. I have. It's been amazing. But I think looking back, what I would say to my younger self, and what I say to young people that I mentor, or coach, really think through kind of a path. Not to say it needs to be a straight path, because I don't think it is these days. I think the path is windy.
Right.
And I think that's all good. Like, I don't have a hang up about that. But I do think there needs to be more intention. I wish I would have had more intention about some things that I needed to learn, because it would have helped with the confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the one thing. And then the second thing would be just learning to set down boundaries, really positive, professional versus, personal boundaries in the workplace. Because sometimes when you're in a family business, you're used to that nurturing kind of environment, and you think that's what you need to do to help people through things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think looking back on it now, if you can teach them to fish, rather than jumping in to try to help them too much, I think I'm doing a better job as a leader, with setting boundaries and then giving tools to support that, and not getting overly involved when it's not appropriate.
Right.
And I didn't know that at the beginning, because no one ever really, I think there's much more intention about taking people through various levels. And I think that's one of the things that I bring to the leadership team now, where, I've seen a lot of things over the years. And so there's, I work with the team, and it's always a filter that I think about, okay, how are we going to communicate this? What's the narrative? How are we going to train for this? So that we give people the tools so that they don't have to learn everything the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's not really progress.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. I really like how you sort of said, I mean, the analogy's been used a ton, right? Teach them how to fish. But, instead of jumping in the pond, I've never heard anybody say it quite that way, but it gives a really great visual, because being in the pond doesn't serve them, right? And setting them up for success serves them, right? So that's a great share.
And it's hard sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because, especially when you're in a sales deal, like, it's like, okay, have I got time to do this learning? And, maybe I don't want this, I don't want to lose this one just to make a point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a balance of knowing when to step in, when to pull back.
Yes.
But I think if you're engaged, Ross used to always talk about, in his way, oh, they're not engaged, or people aren't engaged, or the situation. And I kind of always would think his EQ was really good, but you can tell, like, the other thing is, for me, I'm so passionate about what I do. I'm kind of not, this about me, Oliver, I'm not kind of a half-in kind of a person. I'm either
Absolutely
in
not.
or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sometimes it's hard to get back up. So you jump in and you help too much. And, but I can't be wanting it more for someone than they want it for themselves from a career perspective.
Totally agree.
And I have to remember that sometimes, because I'm like, wow, you've got to see the opportunity here. And I think there's opportunity in everything. I really do. Even the tough stuff. I really do. I've learned the most through that.
As have I.
Yeah,
right?
And I don't subscribe to it, and I don't. One of my biggest challenges that I went through, and I always joke that I don't have enough time in my career to get the full benefit of the learning, but I hope I can if I can even pass that on to help. But people really do have to have their own experiences.
They do, and you make a great point. You can't want it more for them than they can. They have to step up and want it for themselves, right? So even if you see the vision, if they don't see it, it's not going to happen anyway, right? So, I really believe that personal development and professional development are one and the same. And so, what's been that one development tool or book that you would recommend to our listeners that's helped you?
Well, I think there's kind of probably two things that have really helped me grow over the last few years. One is coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Finding either a one-on-one coach or a group where you can really be authentically yourself and get that feedback, and you learn from each other if it's more of a group setting. So I know that when I was in McKay for those years, I learned a lot from the other sectors that were represented by the leaders in the room. And I think that gets you out of your own little myopic world.
Right.
And so I think there's some real value there. And then oddly enough, there's a book that I did, I think the author is Buckingham of Strength Finders.
Yeah.
And,
Marcus Buckingham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I did that a long time ago. My sister was a teacher, and so she was like deciding that. I said, "Oh, I'm not in your class. I'm not your student." But she set me up, and she really wanted me to do this. And it was transformational for me because it really helped me to understand myself and what my top 5 strengths were. And once I learned that, it just so resonated with me that I sort of kind of relaxed and went, okay, I'm okay. Like, this is who I am, and I don't have to feel ashamed of it or embarrassed, or this is just my DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allowed me to fully embrace that. And over the years, there's been many times when I've been engaging with someone and said, these are my 5 strengths. I want to share them with you so you understand where I'm coming from, and I want to know what yours are,
Right.
so that we can work together, because like one of mine is focus. So over the years, a lot of the time, people that will be working with me would find me, very direct or maybe a bit abrupt at times. And it was really not about being rude. It was just about, okay, let's get down and do this. That's my focus side of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not personal. And so when I could actually explain that and be comfortable with it myself, it helped me to be a better leader.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. When I think about Strengths Finders, and I just finished using it with 3 business partners.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did we look at their top 5 strengths,
Mm-hmm.
and as you know, there's about 30, right, that come up.
Yes.
And I said, but go look at your weakest one, each of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing was the frustrations they were having with each other, for sure, for 2 out of the 3 of them, were they were expecting that individual to have a strength where it was their lowest one. It was never going to happen, right? So when they realized that, it's like, okay, well, if that's never going to happen, now we can accept each other, and we're not judging each other all the time, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I just like the premise of it, that you're building on your strengths.
yes.
For decades, we were always like, okay, what are you not good at? Let's go work on that. Well, why? Like,
Waste of
let's
time.
Yeah, exactly. And, you and I have talked about that over the years.
Yeah.
The other book that I've been reading, that I finished reading, and it's kind of on the other end of it, is a book by Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings. And so, I talked about the boundaries, and I've talked about, thinking through, the intention of, planning your career and that kind of thing. But another thing that's really resonated with me is, just, when you're a salesperson at your core, and I'm a relationship seller. So relationships were always really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I take great pride in that. Ross was the same. The manufacturers that we represent today, we've been representing most of them for decades. We're really proud of that, and our customer base.
That speaks volumes.
It's huge. Like we've had many of the same customer accounts for like decades, and we're really proud of that. So as a result, we have friends and people that we've worked with, and sometimes there's a natural ending to things. And that's always, that's been hard for me to sometimes let some of that
Yes, absolutely.
There's business things that need to change, and that's part of having that resilience.
And people that need to leave sometimes,
yeah,
right?
and also, and for them and for us, and they thrive, and it's not all bad, but also just knowing when it's time to have a change, and so, because you really need capacity to keep growing. And if you have this, I always think about, I've got this big net behind me. And if I just keep trying to hang on to everything, maybe they don't even want to hang on, but they're doing it to be nice too.
Right.
So, what does that look like? So this book's been really intriguing for me about, necessary endings. A lot of it's quite positive, and some of it's less positive, but it's worth thinking about.
Right. Yeah, and of course you and I initially met through McKay forums,
Yeah,
right? Because I
yeah,
have my 2
absolutely.
groups here in Calgary.
Yeah.
So, you've shared, a lot of your knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and, taken us through the RGO journey. So, really appreciate you spending the time chatting about everything, but also sharing all those nuggets for our listeners. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Oliver. I think a lot of you, and you've been part of my journey. So, I'm happy to share a little bit what I've learned. Hopefully it helps someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Or
okay.
a bunch
Yeah.
of someone's,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Great.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Yeah,
Cathy.
thank you.
So you've been listening to the Business in Calgary podcast powered by Sonic Coaching. Make sure you watch for our next episode in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone.